Awesome.
Let's
Well,
walk.
let's walk. Yes, I love that. So, first of all, thank you so much for doing this with me. I mean, just I've been a huge fan of your work for quite some time, starting with him in and just as we walk around the room, I put this in chronological order and it was almost like a diary of just kind of walking through the project that you've been working on. And I mean, this is just an absolute beautiful gallery and it's because of your artwork. So, first of all, thank you for creating everything and thank you again for doing this today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. The when you shared the link with me a few days ago and I walked in the gallery, it was just kind of like so moving. I almost started crying to see all these projects lined up and in this gallery setting. It's so beautiful. So thank you for arranging this and inviting me to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it was so much fun putting this together, and yeah, just seeing the final product. I'm really proud of how it all came together so well. But again, you made this very easy for me.
Well, thank you.
Awesome. We can dive right in. So we can start with him. And funny enough, this was, I think, the last piece that so and so and I did on our last walk and talk, which is our first collector one. And he was just saying how impactful this piece is for him. And like when he's telling people about generative art, this is usually the first piece that he goes to just because of how clouds are generative artwork in the sky. So I'd love to learn a little bit more from you, kind of where Heyman came from and kind of your process to getting to these generative clouds that we now know and love.
Ah, yes. Okay. Well, so him and really, I started working on it in the spring of 2021. And I think it kind of started as a response to this intense moment, kind of year that we'd all just been through with lockdowns and uncertainty and, fear and worrying about your parents and your children and yourself, what's going to happen. We're just kind of starting to come out of that in 2021. And my kids were back in school, but they had to wear masks, and it was my younger son's kindergarten year, so that was like his introduction to school. It's like everyone wears a mask, we wash our hands 100 times a day, we can sing, we can't sing but we can hum, and just all these extra regulations that he had to go through. And as I drove to pick them up every day from school, I had to kind of prepare myself because there's always a lot of emotion after school. I don't know if you have kids or if you've ever had to pick up children after school, but there's just all the things that they've been feeling during the day just comes pouring out at you, and you have to kind of take it and stay calm. And and so I would drive to get them. And I don't know if the clouds are always this beautiful in the spring, but that spring, I just found myself looking at them every day, and they would give me this calmness and just this meditative moment on my way to get them that I needed really desperately. And then, I started noticing these patterns and how the clouds were structured and how the light was reflected. And one day to the next, you would see these same kind of views out your window, but the clouds would be different. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the perfect example of a beautiful generative algorithm. And so that's really where the idea started. And then, it kept me in a good headspace working on a project that was all about something beautiful, and it was really kind of uplifting. You literally have to lift your head up to look at the skies, so you just can't help but feel better, right? Um, but there was also kind of this undercurrent that was going along with that, and there was this like kind of lurking jealousy, maybe. These clouds, they have this complete freedom. They aren't tethered to anything. They can kind of aimlessly roll wherever they want. They don't have any COVID restrictions or border walls or visa requirements. They're just like free to follow whatever path they want to take. So if you look at the work, you'll notice that I didn't include any land at all. The clouds are all untethered from the earth and free. And for me, that was kind of an important message, something that we could all think about. If we focus on lifting others up and looking beyond ourselves and help everyone live a better life, where could that lead? So yeah, that's kind of where him and sprang from, I guess.
I love that. And I mean, I think that message definitely rings true. And I think it's interesting now that you say that. I mean, all you see are the clouds in the sky. There's nothing else. So I think knowing kind of why that is just makes this even more powerful. Because I mean, it definitely has the visual beauty, but I think understanding the deeper meaning just gives it even more impact.
Well, thank you for that. So when I was looking for a name for what I was going to name this project, we had been listening to a lot of sea shanties. My son was way into sea shanties, and so I was looking at kind of these older Norse and Icelandic languages, and I found the word himmin, which was translated on everywhere. That's not a, I don't think it's an in use word anymore, but it was translated as a sky instead of the sky. And I loved that because it was like a snapshot or a moment, like a captured moment of time, never to be repeated, like a hymn in a sky. So,
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna ask where that name came from because I was doing a little research. I'm like, I haven't come across that before, but yeah, saw that it was like Icelandic roots, which is yeah, really interesting. And
yeah, just
it's,
a strange way to come about naming a project, but it worked and it resonated. So,
I love that. I mean, it's just very authentic. It was just kind of a moment of time for you for
hmm
going through sea shanties. You come across this, and at the same time, you're working on this project that needs a name. So just sometimes the universe works like that.
yes, yes, exactly.
It's amazing. And one thing I did want to talk on, maybe more on the process side. I know on your website, you were originally kind of working with this system using photographs, but knowing that you would have to put this on the blockchain and knowing the size constraints that you were going
Mm.
to have, you kind of had to develop a new system to kind of generate something similar, but using less size. So I guess talk us through kind of how that process or kind of how that change took shape. And I mean, do you think that these constraints overall helped elevate the project, knowing that you kind of developed this new system to make it work?
Oh, yeah, I think definitely. When I was working before, kind of even considering the idea of long form art, and I was using a photograph, then you may get some different outputs, but it was always the same composition, right? Because you just have the same underlayer that you're using. So even though it might look slightly different, it was very much the same. So when I figured out how to, I don't know, create my own photograph in the code, then it opened up all these different possibilities for different cloud formations, different color layouts. Everything could now be completely generative. And that was a new discovery for me because I hadn't really been working like that with this painting style that I was doing. I had done some algorithms that, of course, would do that sort of thing. But so yeah, it was a whole new way of working, and I mean, one of the reasons it took me so long to release him in was, I applied for Art Blocks in February of 21, and then Jeff got back to me in April, but I had all these questions that I didn't really understand, like how big can the code be to be like that you can afford to put it on chain? What are these constraints? And they weren't like so easy to find. Um, so it took me a long time to work through that, and then you just had to kind of go for it, and that's where I ended up. So yeah, but the code
That's,
for Himin is only like I think 7 kilobytes. It's actually really tiny.
wow.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's very, very small. 'Cause, I mean, I'm sure the photographs that you were using before is multiples more than that.
Well, right. I mean, one photograph, if any, is going to be like megabytes, right? And we're talking about tiny kilobytes, so or gigabytes, I
It's
guess.
crazy. I
Yeah.
mean, like, how do you view constraints as an artist? Like, do you find them to be helpful in a way? Do you find them to be like totally limiting? What's kind of your thought on it? Because I've heard mixed reviews from some of the artists that I've spoken with about this.
Yeah, I love constraints. When the whole world is open, I'm overwhelmed and I have an anxiety attack. So give me some constraints, give me something to work within, and like as I push against those constraints, I think I find my way. Um, and yeah, so definitely would prefer to have some limitations or some things that I have to work inside of, some way to like limit the world that I'm working in.
That is very fair, and especially in a world of just infinite information and infinite knowledge,
Uh-huh.
it's like
Yeah.
where do you draw the line? Like how do you stop? But knowing that you have a size restraint, knowing that you have maybe sometimes a time constraint. Those can
Mm-hmm.
be sometimes pretty helpful to allow you to make decisions and just continue to move on. 'Cause sometimes you just overthink and then you realize that it was done before, but you just kept going and didn't really necessarily realize it.
Yeah, I always save snapshots of my work as I'm going, and if I have gone too far down a path, I compare it to older versions to like make sure that I haven't, lost the thread of what I was working on and what made it special to me when I first started. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a very wise decision. And as you look at because I tried to put a few of the different types of outputs on the wall, do you have a favorite that kind of got minted or a favorite style that you think kind of resonated with you the most?
Um, I I mean, I think probably I'm usually most love the late afternoons, which you have here on the wall, the second kind of one there. I just the blue variation within that and the yellow in the clouds. I love how that's like a perfect day, like a perfect sunshiny afternoon. But I mean, I love all of them. I love the morning and kind of thinking about the whole world's opening up to you and the skies are kind of purple as the new day dawns, or the night, which is fun too. Although you don't necessarily see the clouds that much at night, so maybe it's less realistic there. I had to make them pop. But I noticed that
I
this.
think at dawn, I think you can, or dusk, or whichever one it is. I think
Right.
you can still see some clouds. So I think it plays.
Yeah.
And if everybody wants to kind of flip over to the middle kind of column there, I put a picture of a project that Sarah worked as a result of Himen and the success around Himen. And these are transit shelters that she was able to build as a result of this project in her community, which is so cool. And I know you were mentioning before that this project is going to be finalized fairly soon here. So first of all, I love how Art Blocks just has an amazing track record of giving back to the communities, the Art Blocks artists with their releases. But I think it's especially cool to kind of see it in the physical world because I think so much of what we do online, it's hard to kind of see kind of tangibly the impact that can be made. But I think this project specifically is such a cool thing that I mean it really makes a difference in the community. So first of all, this is amazing. Congratulations. And yeah, would love to learn a little bit more about how this idea came to be and kind of now that you're almost done with the project, like how has that been? Because I mean it's been multiple years.
I know. I cannot believe that we're still talking about it as if it's not fully there, but it is finally. So for this project, let's see. I have to kind of go back in time. Kind of a long time ago, I was rushing to get to work one day, and I was really late, and I was frustrated and mad, and it was raining, so everyone was driving really slowly, and I was like really wrapped up in myself and my problems. And I drove past this guy, and he was standing on the corner, waiting for the bus, and his hands were full of bags of groceries, and it was just pouring rain on him. And he like couldn't put his hands over his head or anything because he has all these. He even had groceries in the bags around him on the ground. Um, and I drove past him, kind of looking and thinking. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I think I'm having a bad day. That guy's having a terrible day. And I remembered that I had an umbrella in the back of my car. So, like, of course, my first thought is I want to take this guy wherever he needs to go. But my family has told me many times that I cannot do that for safety reasons. So I went back and I got out in the rain and I got the umbrella and I opened it up and I offered it to him and he was kind of taken aback. But then he took the umbrella and he was so relieved and like really grateful and that was it. Like I left, he said thank you, and I was just like, have a good day and good luck. And but I never really forgot that moment. Like it was so impactful to me, just like how it felt good to be in a place where you're so frustrated and then like look beyond yourself and see someone else that's struggling even more and reach out and help them. So when Hemming came along a few years later, and I was kind of thinking about what charity or cause that I wanted to support, I was thinking about that moment. And I live in a smaller city in Arkansas. we don't have a lot of public infrastructure, so people wait for the bus like sometimes a really long time. It could take an hour for your bus to arrive, but you're still dependent on that bus because that's probably the only way you're going to get around town. So I was like, well, what I want to do is build some transit shelters and like extend that umbrella moment into something permanent and lasting for years to come. So I wasn't really sure how to go about it, but as it became more obvious that like this is, I'm going to have this opportunity, I started contacting some people and I found a local organization that had done a project like this in the past. And excuse me, and so they were able to work me through it. They were able to accept the funds with crypto. That all worked out, and like we worked with the city, and I thought maybe we're going to be able to build two, maybe three. I don't know how much these things cost, but they were able to actually use federal matching funds, and we were able to build 12. So I thought that was incredible.
Wow, that is so amazing. And again, I mean, that story just makes this even better. Just knowing that that person, like, if it is going to be raining next time, like, there's now 12
hmm
of these that are going to be able to keep him out of the rain and make his day a little less bad. So, I mean, that's just amazing. And I see that is there artwork on the back of this one?
Yeah, there is. So the other part of the project was that we reached out to all the local schools and invited students to submit work. And we kind of had a mental health theme. So we asked them to support or to submit work that would kind of support, positively encouraging people while they were waiting for the bus. So it was a really exciting moment for these students to be able to share their work in the community and show it off, and hopefully feel encouraged to continue, making art an important part of their life. So this is, I think this was a high school student. I cannot think of her name. I should know it so I could say it, but I don't know.
That's so wonderful. And yeah, really looking forward to seeing the other 11 out there in the wild. Yeah, hopefully there's some pictures of them at some point because I think these are the types of stories that the world should know because these are, I mean, real positive impacts. And again, like art can do some wonderful things. And this is just another example of that.
Yeah, I mean, just thank you so much to everyone that supported him and made this project possible for my community. I'm always grateful for that.
Truly, truly wonderful. Well, I know we've got a few other projects to get through, so I want to make sure that we hit up on them all. So if everybody wants to walk with me around the gallery, we'll move on to the next one. So this one, I think it's my favorite. I mean, this is one of my favorite generative projects in all of the blockchain land. Memory of Nymphaeus. This was released on Endless Ways, which was a platform that Leah Something created, I think back in 2022. And this was one of the first collector curated
hmm
platforms where people were able to kind of pick their seeds and then decide which ones they wanted to mint. And personally, I remember I was there right when it opened because I'm like, okay, I want to get two of them. I need to make sure that they kind of go together well because I'm sure one day I'll either print them out or have two screens next to each other and I need to make sure that they work well. So I had probably like 25 tabs open. I'm like, these are the ones that I like. This was my short list, but I was also keeping an eye on like how many were being minted. So it was a whole thing, but it was such a fun experience. And I mean, I enjoyed the collector curated ones, especially for something like this where there were certain outputs that I really enjoyed and wanted to get. But would love you to just kind of talk us through this project, where it came from. I did pin in this Twitter space, if you flip over to a January tweet that Sarah did back on day 20 of January in 2022, where you can kind of see the origin of this project start to take shape. But yeah, would love if you could walk us through this and kind of show us how this came to be.
Yeah, so yes, this project actually started with a January prompt. And the prompt, like it says in the tweet, was to make a sea of shapes. And I had a lot of fun with it and really loved the outputs. So when Leah reached out to me about Endless Ways, which not only was it this new kind of collector curated idea, but it was also a concept of having on-chain code for Tezos. So all the code is actually stored on chain, just like on other platforms on Ethereum and stuff. So it was really exciting to be a part of that. And I don't know that there's a whole lot of other on-chain projects on Tezos. There might be, but I thought that was really cool. Um, so the project was really, as you can kind of read my thing, it was um, looking at the idea of an index or an indexical mark, which is a type of sign in semiotics where it's directly caused by the object or event that it signifies and points to, kind of like how like prints on the ground might indicate that something had walked through an area. So I was dwelling on that idea and thinking about how code executes in the computer. You know, it runs through the memory of the computer, it touches the physical hardware, it sends electricity along certain paths, lights up these different pixels on the screen, and then it leaves us with this trace, this image, you know, from the algorithm on the screen. Um, so that was kind of the main approach that I had for like how what I was going to do with this, and then there was also this relation to, you know, I my print work, I do letterpress printing as well. So in my print practice, you know, I was familiar with this idea of inking a plate and pressing it onto paper and leaving a mark. And I loved that kind of physical format. And then I saw this connection, this physicality in my digital work. And I think that was really kind of the first time that I started considering kind of the physicalness that's just inherent in the digital, maybe that we don't think about that much, but this idea of the materiality of pixels. And I've explored that again in other projects. It actually comes up quite a lot in my work when I think about it, but um, just this idea, you know, that these marks are made and left and leave traces, even in a machine, even on these circuits, these little bits of gold and copper and wire are all, I mean, it's minute, but it's still impacted in the physical world. So,
No, I mean that's really interesting the way they kind of break it down that way, and something that also came to my mind in terms of not only like computer memory, but I think it also ties into just human memory and like
hmm
the six words that you used at the beginning of the description, the surface still, the depths restless. My
yes.
interpretation of this from just kind of reading that over and over again, and this kind of came up when I was talking with Danielle King with kind of how memories and AI are related, but we sometimes look like back fondly on certain times, even if there are aspects of them that may have been difficult in the moment, but like with time we do find new appreciations for things that we've learned, and as a result, like we just think of it as a positive experience. So like things in the moment maybe could be a little bit restless, but as you look back on them, I think we look maybe more fondly just knowing what we know now. But I would love
hmm
your interpretation of those six words and where they came from, because I did a quick Google search and I did not see that it was from anything. So I'm curious kind of how you came up with those words because it's really impactful.
Yeah, I kind of wrote that specifically for this project, and I didn't leave myself a lot of notes about how I came to that, but I think from my memory, which is not great, um, that it was really kind of thinking about how, again, we have this kind of surface thing that we're seeing, and it's kind of a still scene, but underneath the water is like teeming with all kinds of life and things that are going on that we can't see, just like so we have these still images from digital art or the blockchain or whatever, and underneath it all, there's all these other things that go together to kind of create this whole ecosystem. So I think just kind of leaning into that was probably what I was doing. I should have written down probably where I came up with the idea.
No, that's awesome. I mean, it's always interesting when I know from artists, it's like, okay, now I need to figure out a description for this. Sometimes it is easy to write them, sometimes not. So it's always interesting just what gets put there. And especially when it's kind of poetic in a way, it's just kind of interesting knowing just the visual beauty. But then you read that and you're like, okay, there's definitely something more to this than just what I'm seeing with my eyes.
Yeah. Well, also
And then,
Nymphaea flowers, their roots are underneath the water, going all the way down to the ground, touching it. So I was kind of thinking about that, I think, too, like underneath, that's how they
yeah,
grow and touch. So,
that's really interesting. And with just the on chain aspect, again, because
hmm
it's kind of rooted on the blockchain. So I think there's definitely some ties in there. And with
yeah.
the endless ways being collector curated, again, this was a couple years ago now, and collector curated is definitely becoming more prevalent on platforms such as Verse, where a lot of projects now are the collector curated aspect. I guess, have your thoughts around collector curated outputs changed over the years from when memory came out until now?
Um, I loved it when we first did it with Memory of Nymphaeas, and what I loved the most about it was that every piece that was minted, I knew that it was something special to the person that had created it, and that bond between me and the collector and the work was just like this really important moment. And I actually did one of the collector curated projects on Verse last year, maybe. And again, it was really fun. So I think it's a nice way to do it. I think one thing I do especially love is that you don't have to work so hard to constrain the latent space because maybe you don't want an ugly output, but for every ugly output that you prevent, you're also preventing the opportunity for something really beautiful. And so when you can kind of leave that free and let people find what they find beautiful and love, then that I like that definitely.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. And I think there's definitely a time and a place for collector curated. I think it's again based on the project and kind of what
Mm-hmm.
the system that you're working with can output. I mean, like if we look on the back wall here, this big one that I put in the middle, it's almost like a sketch of it with the flowers. And I mean, there's some really interesting outputs that people are able to collect. And as I was going through all of the outputs to find the ones, I mean, there's a pretty nice even distribution across the different colors and forms, and it was really cool to kind of see the collection take place. And I'm sure you as the artist seeing them kind of come across the feed was pretty cool to see. And we'll definitely touch on this a little bit more with bright moments and just again with the live minting aspect of being there, seeing people mint these pieces and just having that really special moment make this piece mean it even more. I do think again for like my two memories that I selected and I minted, like they're extra special because of that. Because like I had not only did I click the button to mint, but I also chose the one that I wanted as well. So it makes it even more special in that way.
Yeah, yes. I mean, yes, it's also really fun to just let it go and slot machine one out to you. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah, I
there's
think you said it
definitely
well. Yeah, it
yeah,
just depends on
there's
the
pros and
project.
cons and certain projects make it makes more sense than others, but yeah, I think this was really cool, and I think this was my first collector curated project ever. Now now that I'm thinking about it, so yeah, it was pretty cool to do. Awesome. Well, let's continue on. We've got three projects left here. We can start with Grapheme. So this project here, now we're in October of 2022, and I definitely remember the day that this came out on FX Hash. I know for the tribute to Herbert Franke, there's a few projects that came out, and I mean this one was just absolutely stunning. And seeing just the amazing colors coming across the feed, and now knowing more about your letterpress history, I think it makes it even more special to just kind of understand a little bit more about the project from your aspect. As far as kind of Herbert Franke, I know you came across one of his books and simple letterpress form, generative images. I think just the letterpress plus generative systems for you is kind of that match made in heaven. And I'm sure when you read
Hmm.
that, a light bulb moment happened. Like, oh, I can combine these two things, and let's kind of figure out what happens there. But would love to just kind of hear the origin story of this, and because I think after this, like with Figs and with Lullaby, we can definitely see some of the similarities and some of the kind of creative decisions that you made along the way. But I think this is a really impactful project. So yeah, I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, so like you said, this was another project that was really heavily influenced by my print practice. And it was also my first project where I incorporated a live rendering animation into the work. So it didn't just appear as a still image, but it loaded itself on the screen, which I thought was really beautiful part of the work as well. And I love this project. Whenever I go back and I look at all the outputs, I'm just sometimes like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that like I created all of these. These are so pretty. But that's just I really relate to this. So it's kind of started. They invited me to create the series in honor of Herbert, who was this, OG kind of legendary generative artist, and he had just recently passed away. Um, and I read his books when I first started coding, this one here, and then that same summer I had been in Vienna, and I was in a gallery, the Albertina Modern, and I was upstairs kind of tinkering with their permanent collection, looking around, and I saw a flash of something interesting on an old TV, and they had this media art running, and I was like, I swear that was code base. So I sat there and watched because it was cycling through a whole bunch of different things. And when it finally came back, sure enough, it was Franca's Mondrian project from 1979. Um, and I knew that he had just shown, I think, something based on that at Art Basel and had joined Twitter. And so I was familiar with his name because he had just kind of been making a splash lately, and maybe even done a series of NFTs. I'm not sure. So I was just like, this is so cool. I don't think I've ever spotted like generative art out in the wild, especially like this older work from the 70s. That is just amazing. So I sat down and I just watched it for like an hour. People kind of wandered through the gallery, and I was just watching it and making videos, and just it was so exciting for me. And I think I tweeted about it too. And when they reached out to me, I was just so honored to be a part of that because I just had this memory that summer, and read his books before, and so I wanted to create a series that would really reflect kind of his books and his writing. He did a lot of writing, not just about generative art, but just like fiction, an amazing story. He's an amazing storyteller, and how that kind of influenced me in my art. So, like we talked about or it says the font that I used was actually one that I had designed for my letterpress work. This is the only font I've ever made, so I thought it was really awesome to be able to incorporate it into my new kind of code practice. And I just spent a lot of time kind of thinking about, you know, I incorporated the letters from the hash, the minting hash, so that they wouldn't be completely random, but they would actually kind of represent that moment of, clicking by, I guess. And I worked with layers more than I had before. I kind of cut things apart and overlapped them and moved them around and introduced all these new textures and discovered these domain warping techniques from, I don't know that I can pronounce his name, Inez, this guy that has a bunch of really, really well known domain warping techniques that you probably all know who I'm talking about, and I can't say his name. Um, but so it was really fun for me because it pushed me beyond anything I had done before. There were so many new techniques that I discovered and mixed together to create this algorithm. And also, like you said about the colors, I think the colors is what resonates the most with me. I had so much fun working on these colors. And when I was seeking my inspiration for that, I was reading this book that Frank Grube wrote called Wilderness Under the Earth, and he describes his all these spelunking adventures. I guess he was a big caver, and I was just trying to skim it and find like interesting words or maybe ideas for colors that would come out from this. But I kept getting sucked in because it was so vivid, like the way that he would write about these things and these glittering structures that they would encounter and the rainbow crystal palaces and fairyland forests of jewel stalactites. It was just the words and the descriptions and everything about the stories that were exciting and adventurous. And so I ended up reading the entire book while I was supposed to be working on the project, but it was great. Um, and so, yeah, there's different color palettes. They're named for, I think, just different formations and things and interesting words that were from that book. And then the font, the letters are all, it's all uppercase because I only did the uppercase letters when I created the font. So that helped me, a constraint to work in. And yeah, I don't know what else you might be interested in.
That's, I mean, there's so much to unpack there.
A
I
lot.
think,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I've got a few questions coming out of that. I mean, first is with the colors, and I mean, I guess color just across all of your project. Like when you zoom out and look at this gallery as a whole, I mean, the color just absolutely pop off, and like there's so many different colors, but they all somehow work together so well. So like, how do you think about working with colors? I guess for this project specifically with all of the layering and kind of the different components, but then just as you zoom out to Sarah Ridgley working with color, like what does that process typically look like? Like what are you looking for? How do you know when you've got the colors right?
I think you're going to be looking for a lot of blue and pink, first of all. I use a lot of blue and pink in my work. I love different shades of that, and I love yellow. I didn't realize how much I loved yellow until recently, and I was looking back and I was like, man, you think it might just be this kind of bright color, but it's so warm and adds so much to all the other colors around it. I really like a mix of like bright, vibrant, and then like something more pastel, so that your eyes kind of have different places to go in the work, something deeper, and then something, just so it's a lot about thinking of color as the tone and the value as well when I'm approaching it.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, for graph theme, I think it's 242 or the one all the way on the right. Like that kind of like purpley blue with like the pink highlights and then that like splotch of that seafoam green. Like this is just
Hmm.
like, yup, this is amazing. Like I love
Yeah.
this so much. So yeah,
Yeah.
those are
Thank
like
you.
some of my favorite colors. So I had to include this one in here.
Yeah, I love this palette too. I can't remember. Let's see. I think it's called. Oh, that's Glass Rain. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. It's
Yes.
yeah, phenomenal. And I guess going off another question that you were kind of mentioning with the letterpress and with printmaking, I know you've now incorporated this in a few of your projects, and again, I love how you were able to incorporate the hash for the piece in the output, and I think leveraging just the new technologies that blockchain has to offer, I think for when people have creative ways of kind of incorporating that into the project, I think that's just really pushing the space forward and finding those new creative ways of things that just weren't possible before. But when you think about letterpress and printmaking, I mean, kind of where did that interest come from initially? Because I know when we were chatting before, you said that letterpress was one of the first things that really kind of drew you into the art world.
Yeah. So actually, I discovered letterpress printing while I was in law school. So I was supposed to be studying, and I was playing around on the internet reading about this ancient technique using these old big pieces of equipment, and I was so intrigued. Um, because I didn't really know that that was still a thing, and this was a long time ago, let's just say. And it was kind of before the letterpress revolution that happened maybe in the late, early teens or whatever. So there was no way for me to have exposure to these machines or to know, like, to go around and see them. So I just bought one on eBay randomly. And well, that's the whole story, but I ended up with the machine and I taught myself how to use it. There's some forums with these like veteran printer guys that were just super helpful and would tell me what to do. And they actually told me, I thought this was really funny. They're like, Fort Smith, that's where old George somebody, the most famous printer guy ever lived. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? I didn't know anything about it. And I guess he had passed away in maybe 10 years before this interest, but they were all excited that that's where I was and that I was using a press in Fort Smith. So they're more than willing to help me.
That's that's a crazy coincidence. What a
Yeah.
small world. And I feel like just forums like that for just niche communities, I mean, like our community, are always super warm, welcoming, and willing to help. I mean, that was my experience with art blocks. Like, I minted something. I'm like, okay, I don't really know what happened, but I'm gonna hop in the artist Discord just to kind of see what's going on and like what I just did. And everybody there was so warm and helpful and really allowed me to make this connection to generative art in a way that art always felt just just very just not for me. And this was kind of that first moment where I'm like, oh, maybe there is something for me here. And that was that first connection. And I think there's something really powerful in those small communities and like
Mm-hmm.
really people that care and love about it and want to help it grow. Like this is, I mean, that's just I think the recipe for success. And I'm glad that you found it with letterpress because I feel like then it allowed you to kind of continue on your journey down the rabbit hole into these other amazing areas. So thank you to those people at that forum.
Yeah, I think so too. Yes.
That's amazing. Have you ever tried like making any letterpress physicals of any of your generative work?
Um, yeah, I've been asked this question a couple of times, and I always am like, no, because I can't have all the colors. When I did letterpress printing, I mostly just did black ink.
Got
I
it, got
had
it,
I
got
had
it.
a bunch of, and when I was my mind was open to the world of code, and I had all the colors. I was like, why would I ever go back to that? No, but I have printed a few small things. Just for myself. I haven't, I don't think. But I also got a risograph printer, which is kind of a digital silk screen. And it actually has lots of different colors that I can use. And I have started working with that again to explore. I'm really excited. This is kind of where I want to go from here, I think, is finding ways to create programs that can go to these different layers for the different colors and then printing them together. And yeah, I'm really excited about that for the future. So,
That's amazing. Definitely keep
yeah.
us in the loop on that. So I know when we were talking with Corey Haber, I think he was walk and talk number three, but a lot of the physical works that he did, like when he would be coding it, like he'd be coding based off of like the physical colors that he was gonna then be able to use for like the physical plots. So it's just kind of
Mhm.
interesting again when we talk about constraints, you're like, okay, these are the colors that I have, let me figure out interesting creative ways to kind of put together color palettes in a generative way. So I thought that was an
Yes,
interesting tie back to kind of the way that Corey was working on his projects.
exactly. Yeah, and the only program that I've made so far that's generative for my risograph is something that allows me to lay out a whole bunch of small pixels and then overlap them to see what colors I can find because the cool thing about Rizzo is that it's kind of a low opacity, so you can layer colors and make new colors. So you really have,
Interesting.
it's almost like RGB. It's almost like what I already have, where I can have a red, a green, a blue, or maybe a magenta, cyan, and yellow, however you want to look at that. Um, and then layer them and create all these colors. So without
That's
having to
amazing.
print like 500 different, plates to get there.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I actually started recently doing some Japanese woodblock printmaking. So I've got like
Ah.
my main key block, I've got all the different color blocks, but like you mentioned, like each color that I have six different colors. Like I need a block for each one. So it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
fun using older technology, but it's like now that in the modern way there's so many better ways of doing it, but I mean it's been so much fun to do, and once I make some more progress on it I'll definitely share some of that out with the world. But it's been a wonderful process, and yeah, I would love to chat more about just printmaking and letterpress.
Oh,
I feel like
yes.
it's all kind of in the same family.
Uh-huh. Yes. I would love to hear more about that. That sounds really fascinating, actually.
Yes, I will keep you in the loop.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, I know we've got about 10, 15 minutes left. We got two projects. I think we're doing pretty well on time. So let's flip around to a lullaby for Euclid. And this project is extra special for me. Not only was I lucky enough to collect one of these, but I was also at the FemGen event at Art Basel in Miami in 2022, and I brought my sister with, which was super
Oh.
fun. And this was her first experience into the crazy world that I've been telling her about for so long. So for her to be there in person, she's been a creative her whole life, and I think just seeing just other women in technology talking about their work, I think was really inspiring to her. So I would love to learn a little bit more about this project for that event and then just kind of how that, like, because I know you were a part of some of the panels there at FemGen as well. So would love to kind of reminisce about that.
Yeah, so this is the project where I almost completely failed. I was still working on it up until the day I left for Miami, and I hadn't tested it on FX Hash. And then I actually missed my flight to Miami because, I'm always running late, like I said earlier. So I went back home and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to upload this and get this all off my plate. Um, and then it wouldn't run. And I was like, what is going on? I tried it again and again, and then I started panicking. And so I started spamming everyone at FX Hash until finally Cypher put me in contact with Liam Egan. And then we spent all morning like working on trying to untangle and figure out like what is the bug in this code? Why won't it go on there? And then finally I called Nicole like about to cry, and she's like, it's okay. You're going to figure this out. FemGen is going to be fine. You're going to be fine. It's like, okay. And so I went back and I started working on it. I figured out that it was not an error in my code at all. It was that there was a field where I was supposed to put the canvas name, and I was putting the wrong canvas name. And I had spent like 6 hours on this, and I was just like elated and yet also so mad at myself. Anyway, so that's just a little fun backstory. Um, you know, the when I was having that issue, kind of part of the thing that I was worried about was that I was using WebGL for the first time. And I was like, surely there's something here that I don't understand about WebGL, but it wasn't that at all. And so that you can kind of tell when you look at it that the shapes on the screen are kind of 3D, right? Because I was using WebGL to generate geometries, and that's also kind of where the name came from, the lullaby for Euclid, because he is the father of geometry, and I was using these really basic geometries. But then I kind of using the same process that I've always used. I would take a snapshot of what that um, had laid out to at the in that moment, and then it would like paint on the screen. But then I had this idea that I wanted it to be an infinite painting, an infinite story. I think one of the lines is that yeah, the plot is simple, but the story lasts forever. And that was kind of this idea, like the plot is just these swinging pendulums gracefully kind of moving through time and space, but it lasts forever. In that it's like if you started it running, it would just keep going and going. Um, so, you know, I was kind of thinking about how in the digital space, there, like when you set something going, there's really nothing to stop it. There's not any friction that's going to slow it down. So even though if you're thinking of like maybe kinetic movement, like I was, drawing some influence from here, there's no friction to make it stop, so it can just keep going. And I've always loved stop motion animation. I've played around with doing some little things like that before. And in this series, I was thinking about like stop motion, but it would continue like repaint itself in a new position. Like, so you would see not just the movement, but also kind of the repainting of the new thing. And if you watch it, you can kind of see that happening where it like repaints in the new position each time. So it was kind of this living painting, and I was, kind of questioning the role of the computer and the artist in this space. This was one of the questions for the panel that I was going to be on, was kind of where do I see myself and where do I see the computer, and I don't know how to answer that exactly, but it was kind of, is the act of defining the rules more beautiful than the act of carrying them out? I don't know, but it's interesting to think about. So yeah, that's kind of about this project.
Yeah, I mean that's super interesting. And I think the last line too, I mean, like you mentioned, like you start this, it's never gonna stop. And it's actually gonna continue to speed up just because of, again, with the speed of programming, like it's
Hmm.
gonna be able to run even faster and faster with time and with Moore's law. So I think there's definitely an interesting aspect to just the technology aspect of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I got a new laptop recently, and it actually does run faster on that. So I thought, wow, we're already there. That's so weird. But
I
yeah,
know. I mean, just each step, better graphics card, and just it makes a big difference.
yeah.
Is what
There's,
got you interested in trying WebGL?
well, just a new thing to explore. I knew that, well, people always ask me if I use shaders, and I knew that shaders needed WebGL, and I didn't really understand any of that. I've always been 2D, so I thought, well, let's just give 3D a try and see what happens. So that it was just yeah, and it was really cool. I like 3D and I actually use it in a lot of my projects now, or WebGL, specifically because there's this really weird quirk with um, between browsers. You know, people are I know that a lot of generative artists have issues with browser compatibility, cross-browser compatibility, and the issue that I have for me is that even if I tell the computer to draw a line from here to here and there's no floating point error or anything at all, if it's an arc or a circle or anything, it will put, Firefox will put slightly different pixels along that line than Chrome and Safari. And they all just draw the line slightly differently. And it's so weird. I can't figure out why because you have the same exact mathematical thing. Like even if it's, I don't know. So when you work with WebGL, you can there's this option where you can make it you can remove aliasing. That's where the problem is. It's in aliasing, sorry. But you can remove that and then it's the pixels are sharp and so it gets rid of a whole lot of that problem. So I do all my drawings, my
Interesting. I
background drawings
Yeah,
in
did
WebGL.
not know that at all. And I know that as far as cross compatibility for browsers, I know that's been an issue for artists because I know there's been a few times where some projects have been delayed because of that issue. So hopefully
Yeah.
there's some way to resolve it not using WebGL, but I'm glad that this is kind of a way to avoid that in certain circumstances.
Yeah. So, I mean that's just and it probably is just pertaining to the particular way that I work with pixels because I'm always using the pixel array, and if one pixel changes, it throws off everything in my algorithm. So I have to be really careful and specific about how I define what I'm going to use and where I put randomness into the code, um, or it messes a lot of things up.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, that's really fascinating. Thank you for telling us about that. I mean, I just again selfishly for these walk and talks, not only do I get to talk with amazing artists and collectors, but I get to learn so much alongside it. So it's selfishly a great way and reason why I do these. So thank you for teaching us.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, let's hit the last one, figs here. So we can see these live and rendering. And yeah, I'm glad that you kind of gave me that push to figure out a way to get them rendering live because I think it's really important for people to see kind of how these develop. And again, just tangible pixels, symbolic fruit. Again, for this project, there's a deeper meaning behind just kind of like the visual playfulness of this piece. And this again was a part of the Bright Moments Paris collection. So the second to last Bright Moments, really special
Mhm.
events. I know from the folks that were there, but would love to learn a little bit more about this project, that deeper meaning, and then also that live experience. Because I believe you were there, correct?
Yes, I was. That was a wonderful experience, I have to say. It was fabulous. Um, so for figs, I was kind of thinking, the idea here is really about still life. And I have this print hanging from one of Andy Warhol's Space Fruit series. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but he would paint these blocks of color and then he photographed fruits that he had ranged on a table and like blew out the contrast on them so they were just like this really black thing and he would screen print over the top just kind of like his all of his other processes, I guess. But anyway, I've always loved this work and how it was this kind of unique approach to the idea of still life. And, still life has this like history of it's always kind of celebrating these material pleasures like fruit and flowers and, things in nature that are ephemeral, that are going to die, that have a life cycle. And so I was thinking about what that might be in our digital life and, what could play a kind of a similar role. And I landed on this idea of emojis. Um, and I was thinking like what's fleeting in the digital world, what's the digital detritus that kind of litters through our personal communication, where it's like we use something and it's abandoned, but it's always available to use again, just like we eat an apple and it's gone, but there's another apple at the store when you go back, right? So I was, just kind of this thinking about that endless cycling of fruiting and decay and growth, and how still life is always focused on that. And then there was kind of this through line to a lot of my other projects, which I've kind of discussed, where I'm thinking about the materiality of pixels and working with code. And so I was noticing these tactile sensations um, in my work with the computer, where, like, I don't know, the sound and the feel of typing on the keyboard, or the hum of your computer, or the whirling of the fan when you like really overclock it with some loop or something. And like even that kind of plasticky formaldehyde smell when you unwrap, a new piece of technology, there's all these like tangible touch points and physicalness that we don't think about that way necessarily, but that's really what they are. And even as I talked about earlier, like inside the memory of the computer, we have these circuit boards and they have these like paths that the electricity follows. And there's like all this physicality between my hands on the keyboard and the image on the screen that's there. And I was kind of working on blending these ideas together through like this idea of this kind of fleshy fruit presented through code. And so that's kind of I guess the behind the story. So the words that are in the background as it loads across the screen are all really good, juicy, tangible words about fruit, designed to, or like chosen to specifically evoke like the senses, like crunch and caffeine and glop and all these different words. Um, so I was kind of, I wanted to also incorporate lettering again. So for this project, I had a font that I have used, but you couldn't put a font on chain because the font file is like really huge. So I had to figure out a method of encoding the letters. I did the whole alphabet plus a few extra diacritic symbols for some of the French words, and um, then smush it all down to where it's actually a really small piece of code that's create, and the whole all the lettering and everything is, and the shapes for the fruits are all stored within that, so that I could kind of manipulate all the different sizes. I mean, every time a letter prints. I was also thinking about typewriters and kind of the early prehistory of ASCII art with typewriter art, and how every time that you like strike a letter, it doesn't fully ink. It has its own texture every time, at least with a typewriter, or even with like printing. And you know this with your woodblock printing, it's always going to be different every time that you connect the paper and the ink together. So that was an important part of making sure that every single letter that shows everywhere is always unique in some way. It's a little bit different. And then the shadows that kind of, I thought of them as shadows, they kind of lay over and outline the fruit. Those are all made up of tiny text that spells the word for that fruit. So like that's le pomme, or yeah, I don't know if you can see it from up close, but we should
I'm
try.
trying to zoom in on it. I don't know if I can quite see it on here, but I'm going to go into the live view afterwards
Yeah,
and definitely take a look because I did not catch that. That's really cool.
yeah. So the whole thing is composed of letters, except for the little bits where like the yellow paints in the back, or the fruit kind of background color. Everything else is text. So it's like this pulling in that idea again of the digital detritus, or these kind of text words and fruits and symbols that we kind of use and lose as they get buried in our history of all of our communications over time, to where we all end up with like digital like leftovers and stuff. So
That's really, really interesting. Yeah, I definitely need to explore this one a little bit further because I mean, again, this is, I guess, your most recent project and definitely one that I haven't spent as much time with. And obviously, from this conversation, I need to spend a lot more time with it. So yeah, thank you for all the insight there. And again, with this being part of the Bright Moments Paris event, I'm sure you have the opportunity to see people live minting this in
mm.
person. Can you walk us through just what that feeling is like as an artist? Because I can only imagine how amazing that would be.
Yeah, that was so exciting. That was like the coolest thing ever because I've never really been around anyone when they actually like at the moment that their work was revealed. And so many of them were really fun. Like they were just like, "Oh yes, I got the exact thing that I wanted," or "Oh, that like I love the way that this turned out." And then sometimes they had a really big screen in the back, and you could go back there and put it on this like giant screen. So that was fun too. But they had the artists at each table, and we had our own screen, so people would come and mint the piece, and they would press a button, and then it would render right in front of us. It was such a special moment. I don't know.
That's amazing. I know so and so was telling me about his bright moments. He was at the Mexico City one, and he has the Zach Lieberman piece, and like he minted it with Zach right next to him, and
Yeah.
says like just how special of a moment that was. I mean, for me, every single piece that I've minted, it's been behind my computer. Typically, I mean, alone physically, but I'm around my internet friends. But like physically
Hmm.
being in a place with your internet friends and with the artist, I mean, that I can only imagine how special that output would be for you. And just kind of seeing it, like you're both seeing it at the same time live, like that's such a special moment, and really only one that generative art allows to have happened. And I'm just yeah so happy with what Bright Moments was able to do and allow this to happen in 10 different cities around the world.
Yeah, I especially like that last part because you're right. Like no one can really sit and watch a work come into being like this, except for in this uh, generative art space. So that this really is a special and unique thing, and to have the artist there, for us to be there watching it and watching you is like super validating too. So thank you to all the people that would come and be excited.
Yeah, I'm still very sad that I unfortunately wasn't able to go to any of the events, but hopefully Stefan and the team have something else in store upcoming and I can find a way to be at a live minting event because yeah, I can only imagine how cool it would be from the collector side as well. And I think just the
Yeah.
more that we can kind of blend the physical and digital, I think the better, just the more special it is. Because I mean, we're still physical humans and we still are social beings. So, I mean, it's great that we have our amazing internet communities, but when you meet up with those internet communities in person, I think it's even more special. Like, I've been to the last couple art basels, and just my favorite part is just meeting the people that I've been talking with online for so long. And it's like, you're a real person. Like we're talking in person together, and like this is so cool. So
Oh
I think
yeah.
more of this, and I'm sure there will be more of these types of events. But yeah, just I mean, kudos to Bright Moments for putting together such a wonderful series.
Absolutely, yeah. It's every time I get to go to an event where there's other people that I've met online or that are my internet friends. It's so much fun.
I completely agree. I have one last hard hitting question that I have written down. I know we've got a few minutes left here. So, on the concept of symbolic fruit, I guess if you're at a grocery store, you can only buy one fruit. What fruit is that going to be?
Um,
My answer is
Probably.
raspberries.
Oh, raspberry. That's a good one. I think blueberries for me. I love blueberries.
Okay, that's very fair. I think just the berry family to me
Uh-huh.
is the best. Yeah, blueberry, strawberry, raspberry. I think they're all can't really go wrong there. So that's a
Yeah.
valid answer. I'll take it.
I'm actually allergic to strawberries, so there are no
Oh
strawberries in
no.
this piece.
Interesting. Well, I
Yeah.
will make sure that there will be no strawberries.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was so much fun. I know we kept you a few minutes over, so we really appreciate your time and effort and all the insight and wonderful information about the projects that we walked through here today. Again, I will put this up on YouTube after the fact so the folks that weren't able to join us live can witness all of this. And again, this gallery is going to be live for forever. So this link will
Oh,
always be live. So anybody that wants to check it out down the road, they can absolutely do that. So thank you again, Sarah. This was so wonderful. I had such a great time. And yeah, big thank you to everybody here in the gallery and also on the Twitter space here. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to walk and talk with us. So I will see you all here tomorrow. Bye, everybody.
bye. Thank you so much. This was really a wonderful experience, and I didn't know it was going to be here forever. That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, as long as I guess oncyber and the internet's still around, this isn't going away. And one of the things that I have planned on my to-do list is with all of the walk and talks that I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create kind of like a museum where like there's portals within oncyber. So like you can have a portal
Ah,
to these different galleries. So there's just gonna be a big room that has all of the different galleries together. So it's just gonna
oh,
be like a museum. So I'm really excited to put that together. I just need to get to it. But I mean,
that,
now I've got six of them, so eventually I'm going to need a very big room.
that's amazing. I can't wait to see it.
Yes, I will definitely keep you all in the loop. So yeah, little alpha for you all to wrap this up. But thank you again, Sarah. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Okay, you too. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye, everybody.